Hi, everyone. We have three fantastic experts sharing their knowledge with us on and around the topic of active shooter survival. I'm Roger Ryan Ryder, owner of A.L.I.V.E Investigations, and I'm honored to be your host as we embark on a day dedicated to safety and preparedness. Today is the day of our highly anticipated webinar on public safety and survival in active shooter situations. We bring together three extraordinary individuals, each specialist in their own right, to share invaluable strategies, training, and insights for surviving active shooter events. The knowledge and expertise they bring to the table are unparalleled. I can't emphasize enough the importance this information is. First up, we have Derek LeBlanc for the Kids S.A.F.E Foundation. Derek is a leading voice in educating children and families about the firearm safety in a non-political, approachable way. The significance of this topic in today's world cannot be overstated, and Derek's approach, combining active shooter awareness with gun safety, is something every parent, educator, and community member needs to hear. Next, we'll gain insight from the law enforcement perspective with Police Chief Kevin Denney. In over 3 decades of experience, Chief Denney will provide an insider's view on police protocols, training, and response strategies during active shooter incidents. This is a rare opportunity to understand what goes on behind the scenes and how law enforcement prepares and handles these situations. And finally, we'll be joined with Michael Julian, the creator of A.L.I.V.E Active Shooter Survival Program. Michael's extensive background in security and investigations has led him to develop a unique and effective approach to active shooter survival. His insights are not just theoretical, they're practical, real-world strategies that can be applied in any scenario. Today's event isn't just for security professionals or law enforcement officers. It's for teachers, parents, office workers, students, well, everyone. The reality is that active shooter events can happen anywhere, and being prepared is our best defense. So get ready for the day filled with life-changing, potential life-saving insight. We'll have an interactive Q&A session at the end, so don't hesitate to ask questions and provide concerns. This is your chance to learn from the best in the field. I'm Roger Ryan Ryder, and I'm excited and passionate about bringing this most accurate and actionable information to keep you and your loved ones safe. Thank you for joining us on this vital day. So let's get to the webinar. Hello and welcome. My name is Roger Ryan Ryder, the owner of A.L.I.V.E Investigations, and your guide on this path to preparedness, specializing in the A.L.I.V.E Active Shooter Survival Training Program. Joining us today is a front runner in child safety and firearm education, Derek LeBlanc. He's the founder of the Kids Safety Around Firearms Education S.A.F.E Foundation, a trailblazer for introducing non-political firearm safety into family conversations and educational systems. Through Kids Safe and his affiliation with Lethal Lovers LLC, Derek's initiatives in training and skill building have empowered countless individuals in the face of potential dangers. Hello, Derek. Regarding integrative active shooter training with firearm safety, Derek, can you discuss the importance of combining active shooter awareness with kids' gun safety in today's world?
Well, I think it's really, really important is to understand the threats that our kids face, and sometimes, depending on the age group, the threats could be from a fellow student, and so I think teaching kids, about gun safety is important, but also teaching them about potential, risk that they may face, and teaching them in a way that they could understand that they could be put in a position where they could help get law enforcement involved or get somebody involved if they see a potential risk. And so it could be a threat of violence. It could be somebody wanting to hurt themselves or someone else, which, if we don't take these threats seriously, that's how these people fall through the cracks. And that's how people are getting hurt at school.
Excellent point, and I know your program's addressing that generally. So, um, yeah, I think the big thing here is us combining not specifically active shooter, but those big events altogether, right? The bad stuff that they deep feel with in life. So,
Yeah, and
well,
it's about, teaching the kids to be aware of their surroundings, and that's part of empowering our youth, and getting them away from the technology, as a lot of our kids are focused on their phones, but that puts them in a position where they could be vulnerable in other parts of their lives.
yeah. So, so what motivated you to address firearm safety through educational programs to begin with?
Well, it was back in 2014. I was a new instructor and I was working with parents that were new to guns. And that's when I realized, my higher power started calling me that I had to protect the kids. And so I started looking at programs, and there wasn't really one that met my requirements here, being from Eugene, Oregon. And so I started developing my own program. And so it's evolved over the years, and we became an official nonprofit in 2016, and now we've reached over 28,000 kids in 5 states. And it's about having, everybody talks about common sense, but they forget that there's almost 500 million guns in this country. So, it's important that, we have this conversation with our kids. It's sometimes it's a very scary topic for some, and I totally understand that. But ultimately, if we don't educate our kids, then our kids are going to be educated somewhere. It could be through video games, it could be social media, it could be on YouTube, and they're not getting the most relevant information because that's not based on reality. And so that's what we're trying to do is, you know, teach them about firearms in a way that's realistic and topical.
Yeah, and a great approach. We got to, there's always topics of, public not educating the kids on, but parents don't either. So, at what point do we meet in the middle, right? So you got a tough subject to address here, and I appreciate what you're doing. So,
Thank you.
keep on going on. So, how do you approach a sensitive topic such as active shooter when you educate the children and their families on the gun safety?
Well, very, very carefully and delicately, because I know it's a hot button issue right now, and it's something that, as an organization, we're trying to provide solutions, and we definitely don't want to, provide a wedge. We want to bring people together, and so that's where we have to look at the data. The data doesn't support that. Obviously, one life is too many, but definitely the data is not as bad as what the media portrays it to be. And so that's where, we have to be calm, and we have to relay the information in a way that's going to it's going to resonate with the public and the parents, and ultimately, trickle down to the kids, where the kids feel that, they can feel safe and go to school and learn like they're supposed to.
Great. Yeah, sensitive topics are always interesting to dance through, aren't they? So
It is, and I've, being from Oregon, I've heard some really horrific stories, from kids that have come to our classes, and a lot of it is because the parents or the teachers, they're fearful, and so they kind of push that onto the children, and it's hard for their, their mental health. And so there's a lot that goes into it. So, ultimately what we're trying to do is present the information where it's there's no reason to be fearful if we use firearms safely and responsibly, and that's what we're proposing here. And when it comes to schools and violence in schools, it's important that, we got to do things differently. We have to, harden our schools. We have to, I would be in favor of arming our staff and the teachers in the schools. I think that's a very valuable resource, because they are ultimately the first responders there. They're going to get there before law enforcement, and, or a school resource officer. That's a great deterrent. That's going to help keep people that should not be in the schools out of the schools. And so these are kind of solutions that we really should be investing in and researching, to make sure that, our schools are safe. And one thing about what I like to see is, we protect our politicians with armed security. It's like our most valuable resources are children. Why are we not doing the same for them? And for the kids, we should be empowering our kids that if they see something or hear something, they got to let somebody know. And they can be literally the first responders, because they're going to hear something in the hallway, on the bus, on the playground. They're going to hear some threat of violence of somebody wanting to hurt themselves or someone else before anyone else. And so we have to make a cultural shift where it's okay to get help. And when we get help, then we can get that person that's having this moment of crisis, we can get them help.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, we need to teach them to speak up. That peer pressure not to is probably pretty intense. So, what kind of what about strategies on teaching the younger audience that you have as far as firearm safety and active shooter? What kind of key strategies in teaching have you seen being effective?
Well, I think a lot of it is if we can take the emotion out of the subject, right? If we can, because a lot of times families come to class and they're afraid because there's the fear of the unknown, is they don't know what they don't know, and then so until we start covering this topic, and that's where the kind of the light bulb goes off, and they're like, oh, that makes sense, and maybe I'm being influenced in a way that I shouldn't be influenced. And so it's basically we bring them back to reality, we introduce calm, we introduce solutions, and then we talk about the tactics that they can employ to make sure the kids are safe. And another thing that we're advising, and we're talking to the parents, and we're talking about ballistic panels, depending on the age of the child, is those are I the way I would view it is as insurance, because you have something that's a passive way of keeping those kids safe. As long as they have that backpack with them or their binder with them, there's lots of great technology out there. That's going to help, give them a level of protection and help the parents feel a little bit better when their kids are away.
Excellent. Yeah, I think for me, teaching my son firearm safety and repeating the basic uh, safety options, even now to an adult, he's very comfortable with dealing with weapons and talking to people, and he's not scared of them in any way. Unless somebody else uses them unsafe, then he will address that. But it's kind of
Mhm.
interesting. It was just a basic understanding, but once they educated and understand, they carry that throughout life, right? So he's like personally, he hasn't, um, you know, he's early 20s, so but he doesn't, other than what he has grown up with, hasn't purchased any other weapons. He hasn't, he's not a big shooter, but he knows how to deal with that regardless of what his environment is. It's very interesting
Mhm.
to do that. If they don't know, right? They don't
Mhm.
know. They don't know it's unsafe to point that in a unsafe direction or at somebody, right?
Yeah.
And there are some events, that could have been addressed if the kid would have only known how powerful that is. And those video games, it wasn't powerful, right? Because it happens daily to them.
Yeah, that's a big problem is the video games and the way it alters the young mind. It desensitizes the kids to violence. That's a real thing that we should be spending money and research on, is how the young mind is being altered by, violent forms of media, either social media or video games. There are studies, Dylan Bushman did a good study about that. But I see it every class is this altered sense of reality that these children have because of, they're living in this altered reality. And it comes down to us as parents. We got to be better parents, and we got to understand that it's not okay for our kids to be raised by, violent video games or, violent forms of media. You have to understand that their minds are very impressionable, and so that's where we have to be better about, what's acceptable forms of media for them, because at the end of the day, that's what could in young minds especially, it's what's influencing their world views. And so if you have a kid that's is 5 6 years old and plays Call of Duty, then he's going to know a lot about machine guns and think that's the reality when it really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very touchy topic as well. So, it explains this Kids Safe program to us, as well as how you would see that this helps your children react to an active shooter event if they were put in that situation.
Well, so the Kids Safe Foundation, and the SAFE sound stands for, it's an acronym for Safety Around Firearms Education. And everything we do is about, obviously for young kids, we're teaching them what to do if they come across an unsecured gun. So we're telling them, obviously stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown up, stuff like that. So we're teaching them to build time and space between them and that dangerous situation. In there, we're also talking about video games, video game violence, and we're talking about anti-bullying as well. And we also talk about real guns, and that's where we're basically dispelling the myths and the rumors that they might see on either social media or the media that demonizes this type of equipment and tool. And that way we get to kind of answer any kind of questions that they might have, and when we're talking about the anti-bullying component, is that's when we're teaching them about how they can have a very important role in this situation to prevent violence, because they're going to be the ones that are going to see it before anybody else, and so it's how that information is followed up on by either the school district or law enforcement. That's what's going to help keep these kids safe. And I shared a memory yesterday on my social media, because I had a kid that had came to a class a couple years ago. About a month went by, and we were talking about the anti-bullying part, and we taught him, these are the 3 steps that we're going to do if we're going to ever bullied. And from then, you know, a bully had threatened to bring a gun to school to quote unquote handle him. And luckily he remembered these 3 steps, got his mom involved like he was supposed to. She called law enforcement, and they stopped the school bus on the way to school, and they found a gun in a backpack, and it was that close. And it's just examples like this, that if we empower our kids to do the right thing, and we raise them in a way that they're aware of their surroundings and what's happening around them, that's going to help keep them safe, and that's going to help keep others safe as well.
Yeah, excellent point. Wow, it's an incredible testimony that it's working. We don't want them. It's like a lot of things we teach the kids. We don't always want them to use it, but if they get in that situation and use it, very powerful stuff, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the stories that we never want to read about in the paper or see on the news,
Yeah.
and this story that I just explained doesn't get the notoriety or the exposure that it deserves, but we're okay with that, because we know at the end of the day what we did worked, and it helped this young boy, also help that school, help my community. Literally, that school is 10 minutes from my home, and so that's where education is going to do more than any other part of what they're trying to propose right now. So
Excellent. Well, yeah, one of the good stories, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So, in your view, how can parents and educators foster a culture of safety that encompasses both firearm education as well as active shooter readiness?
Well, I think a really important component is obviously the gun safety education. That's a very important part, but also comes down to secure storage. And so the parents have a really big responsibility of keeping that gun properly stored when it's inside their home, when it's not on their person directly. And that's going to help prevent teen suicide. That's going to help prevent that firearm from going to school. That's going to help keep their friends that are going to come over for a play date of their children. It's going to help keep them safe. So I think we just have to do better about our mindset and making sure that we properly secure our firearms when they're not on our purpose. That's also prevents theft. So that's another value to society. And so that's what we should be doing better. And that's going to help prevent these school tragedies.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good. It's the community raising the kids, right? It's not just
Mm-hmm.
the parent. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
interesting concept. So when we talk about implementation, there's always challenges, such as what you're doing, firearm safety training. It's obviously got some hurdles. What resistance have you encountered, and how do you address it when it comes to implementing a program such as your Safe Foundation?
I think one of the biggest challenge, obviously, funding is one of the challenges. Another challenge is going to be the preconceived notion, and and people say, "Oh, this will never work," but they'll never give it the opportunity to work. We have 28,000 kids that have been through our program with 0 accidents, 0. And so that's a testament to the fact that what we're doing is working, and I'd love to see it on a bigger scale. And that's what I work every day. That's why I'm glad to be here, is because I want to get to that next level, and I want to be able to reach 5 million kids or 10 million kids, and I want to kind of take over what the NRA used to do. And because our organization's all about the safety of our kids, and this is something that we specialize, and it's been our mission since day one, and that's what we want to continue. And I did write legislation, and I've been in talks with other states to use our legislation to implement our programs in other states. And it's about having common sense solutions that are tried and true, and they've been tested, and then bringing those resources to the states that need them.
Yeah, excellent. And that its safety factor, zero events, is testament in itself. You put adults in that environment, and you're not going to get that right
Yeah.
because they're willing to take risk, unfortunately, and the kids are listening. So
Well,
that's
and,
interesting.
and what we're trying to do is mitigate risk, like everything, like what you're trying to do with your training program. It's about mitigating risk, and we have to understand is there's people out there that they shouldn't have access to guns, and they're doing bad things. And but how, as a community, as a country, do we come together and promote the ideas that do work, because we've tried them, to help with this situation, and that's kind of our goal.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, that's a goal worth searching out, right?
Yeah.
So, what role do you see the community partnership in enhancing active shooter preparedness, the training I'm trying to accomplish, and gun safety education for kids?
Well, I feel like it comes back to that preconceived notion. If you A lot of districts, a lot of people, they do not want to see this, and they don't want to see it as a viable solution, because then admit that the narrative that they've been pushing for many many years doesn't work. And so how many, I guess my question would be for them is, how many more people are we going to sacrifice because we're not going to do what needs to be done to protect our children? And that's
Yeah,
it's a very very hard pill to swallow for some people, but I feel that it's a conversation that needs to be had. And so much, there's so much noise, it's the noise that drowns out the work that's really being done, that's really important to the safety of our children.
yeah, it's a good point. In the community aspect of it, you're saying, the kids need to be educated, and the active shooter and adults and businesses are kind of hiding, saying that's not going to happen to me. And it's like, well, it's a new society we're dealing with. We don't know that, but even the kids, they may never have another gun in their hand, right? And they'll become adults and things change, but we got to be prepared. And it's like that, learning how to ride a bike. If you do it in 20 years, you'll be able to do it again, a little practice, right? So
Yeah, it's about
yeah,
mitigating risk. And part of what I bring up in the class is when I'm asking, I'm kind of pulling the crowd. I'm asking the kids, how many of you guys know how to swim? And they all raise their hand. I go, well, why did you learn how to swim? And they said, well, because I'm in the pool a lot. I go, well, it's because you can't breathe underwater. And so that's the same principle here with firearm safety. Is there's guns inside the home. Kids can come in contact in public. And so if we teach them what not to do, that's how we're going to keep them safe.
excellent. I know we've talked in the past about it, but I think, how are you working with the schools and your local law enforcement on integrating your safety lessons?
So the goal would be legislation that would make it easier for us to do what we do and authorize our program. The community partnerships that we have with law enforcement, we love law enforcement because they open up their houses to us and allow us to come to their places, their stations, to reach the crowd, the community. And so that's a way to build bridges, between the community and law enforcement. So we're kind of acting as an intermediary there, to build the trust of the community, and show that the law enforcement cares for their kids. And so it's a really good way for all of us to come together and teach and talk about a really really important topic that's going to help keep everyone safe.
All right, and so a part of this education, I want to throw in the lethal lovebirds connection. So,
Mhm.
how does your work with the lethal lovebird enhance those efforts with Safe Foundation? And can you touch a little bit on that, on the active shooter portion scenario? in that context?
Okay, so the Lethal Lovebirds LLC is a company that I started back in 2014 after I was put in a dangerous situation, and I was unarmed and I had to keep control of a situation of a I had a violent encounter with a guy, and I had to keep control of him on the ground for about 10 minutes until my girlfriend at the time came out with a shotgun to save me. And so from that, I mean, I became an instructor. As I became an instructor, then I realized there was other parts to this equation. And currently I'm a full time firearms instructor, and so Lethal Lovers basically is the one that is the company that allows me to be a volunteer for Kids Safe Foundation. Is it covers all my overhead and stuff like that. So they're kind of they're tied together in that regard. And with Lethal Lovebirds, we do a lot of self-defense training. We do I'm an ALICE certified instructor as well, and so we do a lot of stuff. We talk about gun-free zones, how people can use a firearm for personal protection to help keep themselves safe, and the public in general. And that kind of feeds into what we do with the kids, because now the parents are empowered because now they have a firearm in their life and it's part of their daily routine. But now they're giving their children access to that firearm because it's on their person. And so that's where it's really a full family approach here. And making sure when it comes to education that the whole family knows the importance of and why we have a firearm inside the home. It could be for sporting purposes, it could be for defensive purposes, or it could be hunting purposes. So there's many different reasons why people have firearms inside their home.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, there's all of those and some that believe not, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's probably your biggest component there, fighting against what you're doing. Yeah, that's an interesting concept, but great leverage of that business
Yep.
as far as how does it work. So we were talking about your Safe Foundation training and everything. So how, in your vision, how do you think that applies to the kids when they're put in an emergency situation? Um, how are they going to respond to that? What are they thinking?
Well, I think a lot of it's going to be age appropriateness, right? So, a lot of the kids that we see are 4 to 6 years old. That's probably the most vulnerable for kids that come across an unsecured firearm. But as they get older, we have a teen program that we're getting ready to launch, where it's an empowerment, where we're talking about, situational awareness. We're talking about online safety, how to prevent being trafficked. That's a real big thing right now with technology and how those kids are being accessed. And that all feeds into, as we're preparing the next generation and we're teaching kids to be strong leaders, that's going to help them, help mitigate these risks that they face. And the the problem with this is the situation is it's ever changing, ever evolving, and those threats continue to be more, they're evolving as well. And so we have to make sure that we're updating our training standards and making sure that the kids are engaged with that so they can be safe.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think you're giving them really good skills to adapt to this. And one of our things on an active shooter is not to freeze, and don't make yourself a victim because you're freezing. Know that there's
Yeah.
some action you can take. So, good point. Um, Obviously, some expectation and goals with Kid Safe Foundation. You're doing a very impressive job considering those goals and reaching more children and families as much as possible. What do you think your next step on expanding your program is going to be?
Well, we have everything is copyrighted and trademarked, and it just comes down to the funding. And I have a conference in January that I'm going to. I'm hoping to get some more support from the industry to help us, make a difference all across the country. We have a pretty good list of volunteer instructors that we want to engage with and get them involved, that they can go out into their communities to help protect those kids in their areas. And one, we're talking about the active shooting a little bit earlier, is one thing is if that gun gets to the ground, there's things that kids can do to help secure that firearm. A lot of times, depending on the age of the child, is you know 12 to 12 on up, is they can put a trash can over that gun, and they can secure that gun so somebody else doesn't come in contact with that. And so part of it is we have to teach the kids not to be afraid, because there's nothing to be afraid of if these guns are used properly. And if they're fearful, that's when those mistakes do happen. And so that's where we have to understand that training is a good thing, and we should incentivize training, and we should make it easier to train, and that's going to help keep people safe.
Yeah, you get that's a good point. In the a live shooter survival system, where um, some people don't have an understanding of guns, right? So you explain to them that at some point, regardless, they're probably going to stop shooting to reload or change weapons or whatever, and they got to understand that, right? Because that if they're in a bad situation, that's the time to move and get out of the building, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When all of a sudden it becomes quiet. So
Hmm.
you're saying this, you're making out points, covering the weapon to where it's not accessible to
Hmm.
the bad guy, bad person. So interesting concepts there.
Hmm.
So listeners involved in this webinar, how can they get involved, and what kind of actions can they take to support your vision and comprehension of safety education?
Well, they can contact me directly. I am always available. You can find my contact information on our website, kidssafefoundation.org. There's two S's there. They can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel, and everything that we put out to the public is positive. And that's one thing that we don't get the traction that we would love to see, because the stuff that we put out is solution type information, as opposed to the doom and gloom that typically sells ads. So it's a big challenge. So if anybody wants to kind of contact us there, follow us, and learn more about what we do, you can find all of our information there.
Excellent. Well, that's all we had for the webinar today. Is there anything on the concept that we may not have covered that you want to um, add to the interview at the end here?
Yeah, I mean, repetition,
Okay.
repetition, repetition, repetition. Okay, so our kids learn best, when you put together something, and then you can reinforce that. Sometimes positive, reinforcement works really well. And a lot of the stuff that we do is the follow up to our first classes. We do range training for the kids, and this is with rimfire rifles. And this is a way for us to teach safety, discipline, and respect for firearms to children at a young age, in a controlled environment, and with real firearms. And that's a way to reinforce the importance of safety, and also show them that once that gun goes off, you can't bring that bullet back. That bullet can cause a lot of damage, to the target. So that's why we have to be safe at all times.
Excellent. No, that's some great points. So yeah, it's a lot about education, safety, repetition. Kids to adults. That's always going to help, right?
Yeah.
Reinforce it, make it something you don't have to think about much. So yeah, thank you, Derek, for everything you're doing. You got a great attitude, great concept. I wish you the best. Hopefully, this webinar can reach out to some folks to help you.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely something you need to continue. So keep the smile and keep focused. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
I will do. Thank you.
Mhm. We've had the honor of speaking with Derek LeBlanc, a true guardian in the realm of children's safety. His dedication to preventing tragedies through education is both inspiring and essential. All watching, the power to change is in your hands. Visit the Kids Safe Foundation website, learn how you can make a difference, and join us in the mission of a safer tomorrow. This is Roger Ryan Ryder reminding you that awareness is your shield and education is your armor. Stay safe, stay curious, and empower the young ones to do the same. Welcome to today's special webinar, where we delve into the critical and timely subject of surviving an active shooter situation. We are privileged to have with us Police Chief Kevin Denney with Grand Islands, Nebraska Police Department, a seasoned law enforcement professional with over 3 decades of experience. Chief Denney began his distinguished career in 1992 and has since then made significant contributions in various capacities, including patrol, investigations, narcotics, SWAT, and more. A proud alumnus of Texas A&M University with a master's degree in criminal justice and public safety administration, Chief Denney is in the process of completing his PhD in criminal justice. He's dedicated to defining modern policing, community engagement, addressing mental health issues, and enhancing school safety and security. As a family man, he cherished his time with his wife, Tessa, and their 4 daughters, enjoying sports and travel. Today, Chief Denney will share his insights on how law enforcement is trained to respond to active shooter situations, the rationale behind the training, and the best practices that have proven effective in these critical incidents. All right, Chief Denney, could you start out by giving us an overview of your current police training protocols for active shooter situations?
Sure, Ryan. We train in the alert style here in Grand Island, which generally involves the quick response, either solo or team response to active shooter situations. And we train not only our SWAT team, of course, but we also train each individual officer. We're on the same sheet of music as the other law enforcement agencies here in Nebraska, the sheriff's office, the state patrol. And so if there was, God forbid, an active shooter situation in any location here in this area, we would have a coordinated uniform response to the active shooter situation.
Excellent. And I know alerts out of Texas State. Can you just give us some basic background on how they are and if they're nationwide?
Well, Alert is nationwide. They are grant funded in San Marcos, Texas, and their reach is not only national but international as well. And they are one of the preeminent groups that helps not only teach active shooter response, but they branched out into how to deal with not only the initial active shooter, but also the repercussions, the incident command structure. They deal with interior movements initially, but they also work and train police officers and law enforcement for how to approach a target, how to coordinate with the fire department, with dispatch, and they are the trainer for the Federal Bureau of Investigation on how they respond to active shooter events as well.
How would you describe their basic protocol and concept?
Well, their concept is that there needs to be uniform training. There needs to be an incident command structure eventually set up, and that when you do have an active shooter situation, that the response needs to be quick, and it needs to be decisive, and it needs to stop the killing. That's the number one priority, is to stop the killing. And then the follow-on responders are the goal and coordination is to help wounded, is to set up a triage center, and then to evacuate the wounded as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Well, it's good. If it's going international, then we know it's the standardized system is working, that is being accepted. So thank you for that. So in what ways does this active shooter response training, how has it evolved throughout your career?
Well, it's initially when I got involved in it, Alert came around in the late '90s, early 2000s in San Marcos, and I was working with the Irving Police Department, and I went through the initial training as an officer. Was taught by the SWAT team, and that evolved eventually with me personally being on the SWAT team and helping to train officers in our department and other police departments in some branches of the military as well. And it's evolved over the last 25 years or so from an initial just response to the tactical situation, and it's evolved much more to how to develop the incident command, how to work with the fire department and medical services and dispatch to coordinate the whole response itself, because the tactical part of it hopefully is usually ended very quickly within minutes. But then the follow-on issues as far as treating the wounded, how to evacuate people, how to set up other sites to where you can You can do coordinated, not only triage, but also link up those that are not injured with, in a case of a school situation, with parents and guardians. That's evolved a lot more. And so over the last 25 years, it's gone just from dealing with the tactical situation to a much more holistic approach.
Yeah, and I think it also went from tactical to all officers get training, kind of like the mental
Right.
health system. It was a certain few, and then all of a sudden it was everybody at the academy. So it grew into
Yeah.
the situation.
Right. And you've seen the same evolvement and development since Columbine. You know, how we responded to Columbine on April 20th, 99, the police response was not sufficient. And so we had to develop new tactics because traditionally in 99, and you know this from your experience and how we trained in the academy, was if you could contain something, then, you kept it contained and you called the SWAT team.
Yeah.
And that's what they did in Columbine for the most part. They thought it was contained, but it was an active, evolving, continuous shooting event that we were not prepared. Law enforcement was not really prepared for, and thus you have the involvement of A.L.I.V.E and other groups that are teaching active shooter response, not only to the SWAT teams, but to the officers that are going to respond first. For the most part, your patrol officers, your investigators, everybody that's on the street, and not only those officers that are in a given agency, but also when they have to respond in coordination with other law enforcement agencies as well. So, if you have a sheriff's department deputy show up, and you have a police officer and an investigator, and maybe a state trooper show up at an active shooter event, hopefully they're all on the same sheet of music with regard to how to tactically enter the building and how they're going to coordinate as a group to go and mitigate the threat.
It's a great point with the um, different assignments and obtaining that information. Um, I know you did in your history. I was involved when you did some interagency training. And what were some of the findings that you had there when you actually got other agencies involved and y'all trained? Was it? I'm sure it's not just straight off cohesive and everything worked, but what was the end result of that? What did you find out when you went through that process?
Well, when you go through it, you find out that there's a lot of different levels of training from different agencies, officers in different agencies, and so there is different technical proficiencies, I guess, to say some officers, and this also applies to any officers that are showing up at a scene, or even in the training that we did. You may be teamed up with an officer that is fresh out of the academy, or you may be teamed up with somebody who's very seasoned and was on the SWAT team, for example, so that the technical proficiencies, the experience and knowledge and skill sets of the officers varies a whole lot, within an agency and from one agency to another. And I think there is a difference in not only within the agencies, but then if you look at rural versus urban. So that was interesting to me in training, training officers from different locations, different agencies, different styles of policing, because we all know the flavors are different from state to county to local, and the levels of training are different. I was really lucky to be in the DFW area in Irving, and it's a large department, and we trained a lot within that department. We trained the officers, and our SWAT team was highly trained. And but to see the different levels of skill sets and training was probably the biggest surprise for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you're going to see that everywhere else, but um, as we learn and decide to train more, hopefully we can get through that. So, breaking it down into groups, into individual officers, what do you think a critical decision making processes are for officers responding to an active shooter event?
Well, the most critical is that you have to have the right mindset, and we saw some of those issues in Parkland, Florida, for example, where officers were not necessarily prepared. And I don't like to armchair quarterback, but you've got to, no matter what situation you're going to as a police officer, you've got to be mentally prepared to fight through the issue, to deal with the issue at hand, whether it's a domestic call, whether it's a burglary call, alarm call. Doesn't matter what the issue is, but you've got to be mentally prepared and focused to work through the issue. An active shooter is the same way. You've got to be mentally prepared to go in there into a structure for the most part, and to mitigate the threat and to fight through that. And I think that's number one. That is definitely the highest priority in my mind, because time is critical, and if you're not mentally prepared to grab your equipment and get into the building and take care of the threat, then all else is just useless in my mind.
Yeah, great point. And are you getting any feedback from officers that training helps them get through that process?
It does, because as you go through the training part of it, the physical part of it, you're also talking and instructing and trying to work through scenarios, and you're embedding in those officers that haven't had the training the idea that you've got to adapt, you've got to overcome, you've got to fight through the issue. So if you're driving to an event, an active shooter event, how are you preparing mentally? What checklist are you going through? What are you going to do when you approach the structure to go into the building? What are you going to do if you're given a scenario that doors are locked or chained or whatever? How are you going to get into the building? And so we're always talking about all the different scenarios as you're approaching the building, and then as you're in the building, what you need to be thinking about, different scenarios you need to play out in your mind. Because it's always evolving, and so you always are having to adapt. For example, if you enter a building during an active shooter event and you're able to pin the person into an area where they're not hurting anybody, they're in a room alone, for example, are you switching gears to more of a barricaded person situation? And so you're always thinking, it's always evolving. And so those are important things that you're instructing as you're doing the physical part of it as well.
Yeah, great point. And part of that is how do you, in that training, how do they address the balance between neutralizing that threat and then changing gears to addressing immediate aid to the victims that they're finding?
Yeah, that's and that's how A.L.I.V.E, for example, you stop the killing, and then you stop the dying, which is the medical part of it. And so you have your initial contact team that's going to go into the structure and mitigate the threat. That's, ideally how it works. But all the follow-on responders, we in policing are not really good at the incident command structure, and we're getting better at it as we start working closer with the fire department. But that's very important, not to self-deploy, but to set up a command post and then deploy from a command post, because the next group follow-on responders that enter a building are going to be your group that does rescue task force. It's called rescue task force, where they enter the structure. They're taking in paramedics, ideally, into the structure to set up a triage area and an evacuation location. And so it all changes gears from mitigating a threat to stopping the dying for the most part, helping the wounded, applying tourniquets, applying life-saving first aid, medical aid to those individuals, and then trying to figure out through the fire department for the most part how to extricate those individuals from the structure and get them to a hospital.
Yeah, a great point on the establishing the base command. I was involved in a major incident with a gas tanker rolled over and shut down a major freeway in Tarrant County. So having the fire department set up that base command was key, and us working through that and making that 10-hour day, seemed to be manageable.
And it's funny to me in a way that you would think that we would, because we get along great, police and fire departments for the most part, we get along great, and we work really good in some of the things that we routinely deal with together. But you would have thought that we would have really hardwired in an incident command coordinated approach, and that's really been only fairly recently, on the last decade and a half, where we've really done that, and so the tanker rollover, that's an opportunity for the police to set up an incident command, and the fire department as well. I was involved in one kind of similar on the highway there in DFW, where a tour bus hit a metal or a concrete barricade, rolled over, and we had 50 or 60 people in the bus on the side, and they were, for the most part, elderly. So we had to set up a command post, a triage area. It was a very protracted event. Shut down the highway, and shut down both sides of the highway, and had to call in air ambulances, everything. It was, but those kind of things are kind of few and far between. And an active shooter is the same way. But we're getting better on the police side of realizing that if you're not the initial ones to go in and deal with the active shooter event, we need to be thinking about setting up a command post, an incident command, and how we're going to get the most people in there in the most efficient manner to render aid to those that are injured.
Yeah, great point. So, share some technology advancements that you've seen integrated in the training and response to these kind of events.
Yeah, well, back in the day when I was teaching it and involved in it intimately, we would have the pole cameras. So, you'd hold a pole camera and you could look around. That was one piece of technology that we used. But now, nowadays we're using drones. We have drones that'll fly through, and break windows and go into a building. We have the robots that'll work through a building and stuff. And so it depends on the situation. If the situation is more static and we can do a slow search, or we're still probing the location for the bad guy, then the technology that we have, really keeps the officers that are there a lot safer, because you can put a drone into a room and clear most of that room now without ever having to enter it. So, technology is a great thing if you're able to use it and if it's available.
Yeah, a good point. And yeah, they're getting better every day too. It's not just um, putting them in and plugging them into these kind of events. They're starting to broaden out. So drones are the big thing, crash events, and you're talking active shooters and firefighters using it to assess, is it spreading? And yeah, it's just amazing what that technology can help us out with. Um, so, what about mental health considerations for your officers and active shooter? What um, once this event's over, is there anything that happens at the end of these things for those involved, and not including victims, but officers involved in it or firefighters?
Yes, we're doing better. I mean, we've got it. We've got a lot of progress still to make, but we're doing a lot better than we were 20, 30 years ago, I think. The officers, what we have done and will continue to do is we have a critical incident team, we have a peer support team, we have policy that's specific to how we in as far as timing, how we're dealing with certain things after some tragic, traumatic event that officers have to go through. We had one here just a few months ago that was a double homicide and a suicide, and we had several of our officers have to respond to it, deal with it, work through it. And what we did just a week or two after that event was we got all of the people that responded to that, including dispatch, including the fire department, the police officers, all together, and we had a facilitator within that group, and they helped work through that process so everybody could talk about what they saw, what they went through, and kind of just give everybody a self check on how they were doing, and also just provide again awareness of EAP and any other opportunities if they need to go talk to somebody specifically. So we're working on that end. We're doing better than we were 30 years ago because I know, and that we went out to some really bad events back in the day, and then you'd be finished with that call or that issue, and then it's like, okay, get back in service and keep working. And you just didn't have a time to process that. And so we all know now that that's a compounding effect of PTSD there as far as law enforcement goes. It's compounding over years and years and years. So as a chief, my goal is to do better with regard to that with the officers that we do have. And so that's one example of what we do. We also are doing implementing a spousal support group. I think it's really important to complete the circle. So you have your work family, you have your home family, and if you only work on half of the circle, then you're missing the other half there. And so we are inviting spouses to get together and just kind of network and talk about what's going on. I initially get into that group and talk about what's going on the official side, on the police department side, what we're doing, where we're going, what's been going on with us, and then I leave. I'm out of there, and the group itself decides what they want to talk about, how they want to network, and then eventually it's going to lead, I hope, to other resources that we can engage with that group. Do we bring in city human resources to talk about benefits? Do we bring in financial individuals to talk about the finances and what's going on, and what 401k and retirement and all that kind of stuff? I think it's really important. And it all plays into mental health, because if your spouses aren't involved, then they're the first ones to see pattern changes. Is it, you have different friends, or are you drinking more, those kind of things. And I think it's very important to have the spouses aware of the channels and networks that they can engage to get help to that person, because one of the dark underbellies of policing is our suicide rate. And my goal here as a police chief in this department is to do everything I can to engage resources to bring help to those officers, so that does not happen here in this police department. That's my goal.
That's some great points. I've seen that evolve, and I'm really excited about it, from just officers understanding mental health to peer support, and now spousal support. So as far as the big picture, we're all getting there. It's just a matter of when that's going to happen. So it's good for the overall picture, especially for this topic. So it's going to be, regardless, it's going to be a major event for the victims as well as the officers involved. So they go from they could be sitting at lunch to go to an active shooter, right? All of a sudden things change, and that's a lot to deal with. So
well, that's we kind of got into policing for an adrenaline rush to some degree. You always want to help people, but we're all a little bit of adrenaline junkies. But that takes its toll on you in a mental health way and in a physical way sometimes. So we just need to do better every year toward those kinds of things, and learn from our experiences, what we had 20, 30 years ago, and make it better, because we need to do better, and we will do better going forward.
Yeah, I think so too. A total agreement on that statement. So if we look at best practices, share some successful stories in mitigating harm in active shooter situations. What have we, either with events that you know about or in training, what are some best practices that you can share that have been successful in mitigating harm in active shooter situations?
Well, some of the personal ones that I've been involved in, one in particular was an outside active shooter event. And that was really what the success that brought that to a quick conclusion and kept the community safe, in my mind, was a coordinated team response. We had officers that responded. They had been trained in active shooter. They were also highly skilled as far as shooting and proficiency and the weapons systems and things. But one of the biggest things that we did in that particular event was coordinated our communication effectively, our response effectively, and we had a very good team approach to dealing with it. And so, the people that needed to deal with the active shooter as a team came in and dealt with the active shooter event, and then all the follow-on responders blocked roads, knocked on doors, kept the community safe. And so that was an example, I think, of just good coordinated teamwork with excellent communication to stop the threat, number one, but then also to make sure that everybody else that showed up had a job to do. And I think that was an example of the success that I was
Yeah.
personally involved in.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, best practice, teamwork, and communication. Boy, we can all improve on that daily, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, how about the community? How does the community involvement and awareness play into the overall strategy of active shooter preparedness?
Yep. I think it's always an educational message that as we're talking to the community, we need to make sure that they understand, that the community in general knows that how we're responding to these active shooter events, and I mean that by that they're comfortable in the fact that they know that their law enforcement is going to respond to an active shooter event, and they're going to deal decisively with it in any way they need to keep the community safe and to stop the threat. That's the biggest thing, and we've seen some of that play out in a negative way. If you look at some active shooter events around the country, and law enforcement didn't have the best response. But what we need to do, and especially in this community here in Grand Island, Nebraska, in my mind, is to reassure the community and have them comfortable that, God forbid, if something like that does happen in this community, that their law enforcement, not only the local police but the state police and the county sheriffs, are going to respond quickly, decisively, and take care of the issue as quickly as possible, and to keep the community safe. And that is the biggest thing, I think, that we can reassure our community in that respect.
Yeah, well, good point. The community involvement I think is key, and I've always seen that. Do y'all do a Citizens Police Academy and like National Night Out? I'm assuming.
Yep, we just finished our Citizens Police Academy for this year, and that was really well received. It's really enjoyable seeing the citizens come in and go through the driving and the shooting, and listen to narcotics investigators and canine officer, and kind of get that experience, and then they'd come to a ride out as well, because when they go through that whole process, not only are they educated as to why we do certain things on the police side, and they get to ask questions, but it's a communications multiplier for us, because when they go back out to their jobs or back into the community and are talking to people, they're more educated. When they see certain events and certain things that we do out in public, they're able to talk to their friends and family about what they witnessed and what they experienced going through the Citizen Police Academy, and maybe help explain some of the things that we do on the policing side that sometimes don't make sense to non-police.
Yeah, yeah, great point. I think a lot of that's what I saw personally was just education. Telling them what we're doing. It's not a big secret. They used to be thought about as a big secret, but really, very few people have interest in what police are doing, right, until it affects
Yep.
them. So
Yeah.
yeah, the that awareness is great, and I'm glad y'all are pulling that in. I think that's. Would you agree that those kind of involvements is pretty consistent nationally with police now?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's we're doing better. We talk about 21st century policing and how that's different than 20th century policing, and not that 20th century policing was necessarily all bad, but as we're moving into 21st century, we need to, as police chiefs and as law enforcement leaders, we need to define what is different and what makes it better going forward. And I think a lot of that involves intentional outreach to areas of the community that don't traditionally reach out to us. We're comfortable sitting back and having a lot of the community come to us and talk to us, but I think as leaders and as police officers, it we need to be more intentional about reaching out to areas of the community that don't necessarily or traditionally, reach out to us, and that not only involves the engagement aspect of it, but it also includes, how we're recruiting, how we're looking at future police officers, because for the most part, I think local policing is best served by as many aspects of the community working in the police department. We have terrific officers here, and for the most part, I would say the vast majority of them have come from the community, and they police the community that they grew up in. And I think when you hire correctly and you recruit and bring on those officers, that really makes the best engagement between the community and the officers that serve the community, and that is part of, I think in my mind, 21st century policing and how we can make it a little better incrementally as we keep moving forward.
Yeah, great point. We're gradually doing that, but and we're trying to catch up from 100 years, right? So
Yep.
might take a few years to get there, but I see that happening. So, finally, Chief Denney, what message would you like to impart to business leaders and the general public about active shooter readiness?
I would, I go around and talk to the businesses. I talk to a lot of people in the community every day, and a lot of that is to be involved, to try to be involved with your police department. I know everybody is busy. Everybody's going about their day and working and has a family, but I like it when businesses and business owners and people in the community come and do a ride out. I think if you can just come and do a 4 or 8 hour ride along with a police officer in your community, your perspective on a lot of things will change. And I think your confidence will improve with that connection with that police officer and the conversations that you have, because that's really what it's about is policing aligning as effectively and closely with the community as it can. And as far as active shooter goes, like I mentioned before, you have to have that level of confidence and trust from your community that law enforcement is going to come out. And if they're going to come out because you call 911 or because you call the dispatch, when an officer comes out, the community needs to be confident that you're going to do the right thing. It doesn't matter whether you're taking a car burglary report or whether you're coming out and responding to an active shooter event. The community needs to have trust and confidence that when they call and the police officers are coming out, that we're going to take care of business and we're going to do it in a way that they expect us to do it. So that's the message that I would give to businesses and people in our community. Number one is just come out and do a ride out with a police officer. Just spend a few hours, and I think it'll change your perspective.
Yeah, great point. It's a lot of education and back and forth communication, like we've been talking about, to let them know that. Chief Denney, we can't thank you enough. Your insights have been invaluable and also taking your time to discuss such vital aspects of public safety. Your expertise and dedication to law enforcement and community well-being have been truly enlightening. To our audience, we hope today's session empowers you with knowledge and strategies to stay safe. Remember, preparedness can save lives, and it is a responsibility we all share. Stay vigilant and stay safe.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. We cannot thank you enough, Chief Denney, for your invaluable insight and for taking the time to discuss such a vital aspect of public safety. Your expertise and dedication to law enforcement and community well-being has been a truly enlightening. To our audience, we hope you have enjoyed today's session and it empowers you with your knowledge and strategies to stay safe. Remember, preparedness can save lives, and it's a responsibility we all share. Stay vigilant and stay safe. Thank you all for joining us for this critical discussion. Until next time, this is Roger Ryan Ryder. Stay safe and stay curious. Welcome. We're honored to have with us Michael Julian, the CEO and founder of A.L.I.V.E Active Shooter Survival Training Program. Michael has an extensive background in security and investigations, starting his career under the tutelage of his father, Ron Julian, at the National Business Investigations. A respected figure in the industry, Michael is known for his comprehensive approach to security, which includes behavioral threat assessment, executive protection, and most notably, active shooter survival. His philosophy encapsulates in the acronym A.L.I.V.E has transformed the way organizations around the globe prepare and react to the unthinkable. Michael also has his book, 10 Minutes to Live, Surviving an Active Shooter Using A.L.I.V.E, and a sought-after keynote speaker and security consultant. Without further ado, let's delve into our conversation with Michael Julian. Michael, could you start out by telling us about the inception of A.L.I.V.E active shooter training and the program and how it inspired you to create it.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'd
Yeah.
definitely be happy to share that with you. So, back in 2013, I had just gotten to the breaking point of being frustrated and angry and full of angst over the idea of watching good people die at the hands of bad people, not knowing what to do, doing the wrong thing, freezing and doing nothing at all. And I thought, why are these people doing this? Why aren't they doing something? Why aren't they taking action to save their own lives? Now, I come from a, lifelong security and investigations background, including, self-defense and situational awareness, growing up in my father's business. So it was just a foreign concept to me to not understand how to take action to save your life and save the life of others. And finally, I just decided, hell with it. I was going to start my own, or I was going to start teaching active shooter survival. So I started going to other active shooter courses to see what I needed to know to teach it, including, the biggest one, which is A.L.I.V.E. It has been around for over 25 years, and I was going to become an instructor theirs. And then day 2 of their instructor training, after seeing how everyone else did it, I thought, well, those are all fine programs, but that's not how I would do it. I would do it differently. I would emphasize certain things, especially the psychological aspect of having a survival mindset, which the other programs just weren't teaching it. They were teaching the physical functionality of running, hiding, and fighting, which is great. But if your brain locks up and doesn't tell your body to run, hide, fight, knowing that is not going to do you any good. So I created my program with equal parts of mindset and method. So we certainly teach running, hiding, fighting, but first and foremost, we teach not freezing, not losing hope, and always feeling empowered so that your brain can tell your body to run, hide, fight.
Well, excellent. That's definitely inspiring. Shows your entrepreneurship with all your businesses. So thank you for doing that. I, as an instructor, was led to it based on your explanation there. So I thank you for that, and I think you're going to do great things. So another thing is, how's your background sorry, in investigations and security shape your approach to the active shooter survival program?
Well, I was brought up by a father who was in the military, then law enforcement, then went on his own and started our company, which specialized in corporate investigations and corporate security. And so my father taught me situational awareness. He taught me taking action. And he was a bit of a hard ass in that, he refused to be a victim, and he was very much a protector by nature. He was the ultimate, quintessential sheepdog. And I watched him, fearlessly take stances on things that he believed in, never backing down. And he believed that he was not going to be a victim, nor would he allow other people to be victims if he had anything to do with it, against a predator or a bad guy that wanted to hurt good people. And so I just always thought that that's how people were, and I thought that's how I was supposed to be. So that's how I grew up. And I grew up always looking around, head on a swivel, sizing up potential threats, and having a plan to address those threats to come out on the other side happy and healthy, and protect and help those around me that could do the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you. The A.L.I.V.E philosophy is really unique. And can you break down the acronym for us and explain how it serves as that guideline for your active shooter event?
Absolutely. So A.L.I.V.E is an acronym that stands for assess, leave, impede, violence, and expose. Now, it is basically, we call it run, hide, fight 2.0, or run, hide, fight on steroids, because I believe that run, hide, fight, just like stop, drop, and roll, and other little catchy things like that, it's effective. It was great, but run, hide, fight was the first version of active shooter training, and the first version of anything is imperfect. We have to use the OODA loop. We create something, we test it, we find out its weaknesses, we recreate it better, and we go again and again and again. I believe that, that run, hide, fight is great, but it wasn't good enough. So I expanded it to 5 actions. The first being assess. The A in A.L.I.V.E is assess. And assess is honestly, it's 95% mental or psychological. The rest of the steps are all physical, just like run, hide, fight. But assess is so vitally important because how you assess and what you decide really sets the tone and the pace for the other 4 actions afterwards. And assess is simply once you realize you hear those shots, or you see somebody with an edged weapon, or somebody doing something trying to hurt you with a vehicle or fire or whatever, you immediately go into assess mode. It's psychological. You take a deep breath to get a burst of oxygen to your lungs and your organs, because your heart's pounding now. Your heart's pounding and you're starving for oxygen. So just like anybody says when you're upset or you're something's going on, they say, take a deep breath. You take a deep breath and you focus all of your energy. I ask people, I tell them to visualize this funnel and all the chaos and screaming and shooting and blood and people, everything going on around you that can overwhelm you psychologically to make your brain shut down because you don't know what to do. All of that goes into this funnel, and it comes down this funnel and comes out this bright, glowing energy that I say, listen, pretend you're Tony Stark, Iron Man, and you take that nuclear reactor and you put it in your chest. You take that ball of hot, red hot energy and you put it in your chest, and it energizes your whole body. And now you are ready to face a threat or your fear or whatever is going on that could otherwise paralyze you. So deep breath, focus, energy. And now you think, okay, based on what I know, where the shooter is, where the threat is, what kind of weapon they have. Now you're going to consider your next steps. And that's the L-I-V. Can you leave? Just like run. Do you have a path to freedom? If so, take it. If you don't, because the shooter or the threat, the assailant is in your way, can you impede the killer's ability to get to you by creating time and space? Now, these killers, their objective is to kill as many people possible in as short amount of time as possible. They're not going to waste several minutes trying to get through a blockade of chairs or file cabinets or desks on the other side of that door to get to you because they know law enforcement's on the way. They're going to take the path of least resistance, the low-hanging fruit. They're going to find the easiest targets to kill because that is their objective. So if you create time and space by impeding their ability to get to you, they will likely turn their focus somewhere else. But if you can't do that because all of a sudden that threat is on top of you, and it's the last resort, because I don't preach violence is the first step. Violence is only the first step if that's the only step that you can take. But now you have to resort to committing violence against that person who's trying to kill you. Now, many people are very uncomfortable with the idea of committing violence because I don't believe we're born violent. I think violence is a learned behavior, but unfortunately a lot of people have learned it and they try and use it against us to hurt us. So you're going to have to fight fire with fire by using violence against violence, but I want you to do it with unwavering absolution, without the idea of failure, because this is your life and your job is to get home to the people that love you and that you love. So you may have to commit violence against them. And then the E is for expose, as in expose your position carefully. Whether you think it's over or not, if you see an opportunity, if it's still going on and you're hiding, if you're actually trying to impede them, but you see an opportunity because they could come back and find you, and you can expose you have to expose your position to get away, or you do believe it's over and you're now going to expose your position. There's two things you have to keep in mind. That threat may still be valid. It may still be a threat to you. Maybe you think it's over. Maybe you think they're dead, or they ran out of bullets, or whatever. There could still be a threat. So you've got to expose your position carefully so you don't run right into that threat. But also, if you're leaving quickly, you may startle law enforcement and they don't know you're a good guy. And somebody may accidentally pull the trigger when you come around a corner because you've got your phone in your hand and you appear to be a threat. You've got to be very careful. So you expose your position carefully with the idea of making sure you don't get hurt by the bad guy because it may still be a threat, or by accidentally hurting law enforcement. So assess, leave, impede, violence, and expose.
Excellent. That's covered in the classes that Michael has supported, as well as his book, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. So the next question, what are some common misconceptions people have about active shooter situations, and how does the training that you're doing address those
Sure.
situation?
Well, one of the biggest is that people believe that law enforcement will be there to save you. The problem is, you know, my book is called 10 Minutes to Live because in my research, the majority, over 90% of all active killer events were over in 10 minutes or less. 69% of those were over in 5 minutes or less. Well, guess what? In fact, the San Antonio Walmart, 23 people were killed in 2.5 minutes. Okay. Law enforcement cannot get there before it's over most of the time. Okay. So you have got to rely on yourself and your own abilities to save you. You cannot just simply think, oh, law enforcement will be here soon and they will save me. As much as they would like to, they can't beam me up, Scotty, to that position in that situation to save you, because who knows where they are when they get the call. You have got to take action and do everything you can to do what is necessary to survive and hopefully help others around you survive. Another misconception is, well, or one big problem that I have seen, that I have found, especially in today's society, there are many large companies that, for whatever reason, I believe maybe they're so they hate the idea of violence so much that they will not teach their people violence. They will not teach people self-defense. They want to change it to run, hide, tell, because they don't even want to talk about violence. Well, you know, in theory, that's great. It would be great if we could just push a button and violence would disappear from the face of this earth, but it's never going to happen. So unfortunately, violence is a necessary evil. And there are many people who fight me tooth and nail. In fact, I've had many clients, a lot of them in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, who, you know, their campaigns against violence and bad things happening simply fail because you may not, they say, we don't allow violence on our campus. We don't allow violence in our culture. Well, guess what? When the woman drove from the East Coast to Silicon Valley and took a gun and shot and nearly killed multiple people at the YouTube campus, well, they were not prepared because they did not allow violence in their culture. Someone from outside their culture brought violence to their doorstep and they didn't know what to do. So shame on any company that says, well, we're not going to accept the idea of violence in our culture and therefore it will not happen. It's kind of like a gun-free zone. Guess what? Bad guys don't care about your rules. And if they bring a gun and no one else has one to protect the sheep or the masses, then everyone will be a sitting duck. So that's another big misconception. And I am fighting very, very hard to change the minds of those people who believe that those cultures work, because they don't when someone outside that culture brings violence to their doorstep.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's a hard fight, but I think you're heading that way, and you got people supporting you, so that's a good thing as well to get that understanding. Of course, we'll always have those conflicts, right, as far as that, but you're doing it the right way. You're saying that violence, we're not promoting it. We're just saying survive that incident, and violence could be an issue that you have to address.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson. He's a clinical psychologist from Canada, and he will probably end up being one of the most prolific people, teachers, philosophers, whatever you want to call him, of this century. He says it's good to be dangerous. And in an interview with John Stossel says, so wait a minute, you're saying it's good to be dangerous? It's good to be able to commit violence and hurt people? And he said, yes, it's good to be dangerous. It's bad to use it unless you have to save yourself or other people. But you should be capable of violence and capable of being dangerous so that you will not be a victim to others who would misuse violence against you.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, that brings up some thought, doesn't it? So since your book, the 10 Minutes to Live, what changes or developments have you seen in the field of active shooter training itself?
Well, I have seen a lot more companies like mine start pushing the idea of mindset. And you know, A.L.I.V.E is, like I said, equal parts of mindset and method. It's great to know how to run, hide, fight, but if your brain doesn't know to tell your body to do that because it's so afraid and in shock, then it won't do you any good. So I see a lot more programs like mine starting to push the idea of mindset, of survival, of violence. I do know one company like mine who I respect. It's a great company and they have great people. But because many of their clients, they cater to the larger Fortune 500, 100 companies that are so against violence, they have had to water their program down dramatically. And I know one of their head instructors who says, "Hey, Mike, between you and I and the fence post, it saddens me that we have to do this because we're not fully empowering our students, our attendees, and our clients and our customers with what they need. And they will not be prepared if a threat happens, because they will not think about the fact that they may have to actually take someone else's life to save their own and other innocent would-be victims." So one of the things that's happening is people are starting to get it, that violence, though we may not like it, may be a necessary evil. In fact, the new Run I'd Fight video put out by our government, I was so pleased to see that they have given up the idea of violence being such a bad thing that you only do, you don't even want to do. And the old Run I'd Fight video did not promote the idea of fighting back, and the new one does. And I tell my clients that maybe they can't afford me or whatever. They're like, well, whatever. For whatever reason, they don't want to use me. I said, well, I'll tell you what, at least show your people that video and save your money for free, because though, you get what you pay for, it is still better than nothing. And they finally have started preaching the idea of, if it's better to hurt someone else than to be hurt yourself when they're a bad person trying to hurt people for no good reason. So the Run I'd Fight grew a backbone, and I'm very pleased about that. And it's time to change the thinking of these big corporations and companies that are so soft and so, kinder, gentler. That's fine, but not when it comes down to your life or mine. And, I tell my students and my attendees and the people that hear me speak that they may not even like me because of my stance on violence. They may have a distaste for me as a human being just because I say that violence is good when necessary. And I simply say, hey, look, I don't care if you end up hating me by the end of my presentation. I love you as a human being. And I would rather you hear what I have to say, and when the time comes, knows that you are capable of doing what is necessary, including taking another person's life, if it saves your own. Okay, I love you enough that you can hate me. That doesn't matter to me, because if what I tell you, whether you like it or not, saves your life, then I've done my duty as a human being to a fellow human being to help them survive.
Yeah, excellent point. And, more reason to promote what you're doing and support it. It's a great thing, and we have to make people think, because society changes constantly, and you're right in the middle of trying to help the rest of society try to understand this violence that's bringing into our businesses. So thank you. So our next question is, how do you tailor the A.L.I.V.E training program for different organizations, such as educational versus a corporate environment?
Well, great question. It's very simple. And actually, we've got, besides there being an online course and my book and doing webinars to however we can get this information to people, the basic modules that we teach are module A and B. Module A is a simple classroom lecture style where we educate them. We lecture and we show videos, and we may do a tabletop or an exercise. We do multiple exercises, but we teach them about, security mindset, survival mindset. We talk about recognizing the warning signs, because if you know what to look for, you can stop these incidences. Okay. If we tell you this is the profile, or these are the activities, or these are the behaviors, and you see that, and you talk to that person, you talk to someone else that can talk to that person, or they're stopped by force. However, what a great way to, to survive an active shooter. The best way is to avoid one altogether. So if you know what to look for and you can stop it from happening, that's the best thing. We teach the mindset of the killer, so you understand where they're coming from, why they do it. And I say, hey, who here has ever competed in any way, whether it be playing football in high school or chess or any competition where you've got a competitor on the other side of the table, other side of the line, whatever. And I say, if you know your competitor's playbook and you know what their next play will be, aren't you in a great situation or a great position to counter? Imagine if in football you always knew what play the other team was going to play. You could thwart that, right? So we teach recognizing the warning signs, what to do when you see those warning signs, what these shooters, these perpetrators look like. And I never glorify them, their face or their name. I do show faces and I do talk about names for identification only, but we certainly don't glorify these people. And we teach them what they need to do. We go over the 5 steps. That's module A. And then module B is we may go to their workplace and we actually walk through the 5 steps of A.L.I.V.E with them, where they work, where they play, so they can see specifically, use this as a barrier, get cover over here, concealment over there. This is where you might impede in this broom closet or whatever. But we always customize it to the industry, to the location, to the profession, to the layout of the building or whatever. For instance, in healthcare, they always say, okay, that's great. You've taught us how to survive and how to protect ourselves, but how do we do this? And by helping our patients, our children, our guests. So it's really good to talk in terms of their industry or their layout or what they're experiencing, so they can relate to it much more specifically based on who they are, what they do, and where they do it.
Excellent. Yeah, it's it shows that approach, and your adaptation to different environments is going to help the program, because there's a lot of it. You have a general outlook, but some people need different approaches. So that's great that you've built that into the program.
Absolutely.
So how about some success stories or feedback from organizations in the A.L.I.V.E program? Can you share any of that with us?
Well, organizational feedback, without getting too specific to my clients, has always been very good. I hear from my clients, like HR managers, risk managers, safety and security managers, that hire me to come in and talk to or preachers and priests and so forth, if we're going to a house of worship or to a school and teaching this teachers, or to a retail or a business where we talk to employees. It's always the word that I hear a lot, and it's now become a theme in what I preach, is empowerment. People will talk about feeling more empowered, more confident. And honestly, a lot of it is psychological. Listen, if part of the reason that people paralyze is because they lose hope and they feel helpless, and they think, this person has a gun, they're killing people around me. They see the faces of the loved ones and they go, I'm never going to see them again. And they lock up, they shut down, they become paralyzed. I preach never, ever, whatsoever, under any circumstances, are you allowed to lose hope. There is always hope until you take your dying breath, and then it won't matter. You have got to keep hope. And John McCain, the senator from Arizona that ran for president, in his book talked about being a POW prisoner during Vietnam. And he said, those who perished lost hope. The ones that survived those POW camps refused to lose hope, refused to allow the prison guards, no matter how badly they abused them, to make them feel as though they had no hope. So, institutionally, organizationally, a lot of people feel empowerment from my program. But very specifically, I had an employee from an organization, I think it was 87 people I taught back in 2014, right after I launched my program, probably 8-9 months after I launched my program. I went in, I taught those people, and go forward, 2.5, 3 years to 2017. I got an email one morning from a woman named Liz Moreno, who was at the Las Vegas Route 91 Music Festival at Mandalay Bay. And it was a very intense email, and I had to read it twice to really grasp it and then take a deep breath. And she said, "Mr. Julian, you probably won't remember me, but in 2014, my company that I worked for hired you to come in and speak to all of the employees." And she said, "I thought it was fine, whatever, but did not think about your program a day after that until on October 1st, 2017, I was watching Jason Aldean sing, and suddenly I heard what we believed to be firecrackers. And we thought some smart aleck lit some firecrackers there in the group, in the crowd." And she said, and then suddenly people started to become agitated and panic and started running. And she said, "We didn't know what was happening, but I turned around and I immediately saw a woman shot in the face and a man shot in the chest directly behind me." So then we realized it was a real situation, and we said we immediately dropped to the ground. And as I was covering my head with my arms, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I have been in training that taught me how to react to a situation like this. And she said, I became calm at that moment, and I turned to my my boyfriend, and I said, "We've got to go." And he said, "No, we'll be fine. We need a shelter in place." And she said, "No, I know what to do. We've got to go." And he said, "Okay, fine." She said, "Look, I'm leaving with or without you." So he said, "Okay, fine." They jumped up, grabbed hands, and took off running. And she said, we got back to the hotel. I called my mom and said, "You're going to see what's going on in the news. I just want to let you know I'm okay." She said, "I don't believe I would have laid there as my boyfriend said we should, and very possibly died." And I show a picture in my presentation of the field right where she was laying, littered with dead bodies. And she said, "I believe that your program saved my life." She came to my office. I interviewed her. The news even came and interviewed her, and it went crazy. Like the video went everywhere. So I literally got a testimonial from somebody who survived an active shooter event, one of the worst in the history of this country. And she said, "I believe that your program saved my life." So that's about as good a testimonial as you can get.
All right, Michael, as a security expert featured on ABC Channel News, what is one piece of advice you frequently emphasize to the general public regarding personal safety?
Oh boy, one piece of advice. I don't think I can stop at one, but I'll be brief. First of all, don't run around the world with rose-colored glasses on, believing that it can never happen to you. The chances of it ever happening to you are dramatically small. You'll probably never be in an active shooter incident. However, the chances of you encountering violence in the world that we live in now is huge. It's giant. It's hard to believe that you will not have some sort of violent act, maybe not directed at you, but you may be involved indirectly because two other people are fighting or going after each other near you. You have got to be empowered. You have got to be forward leaning. You've got to take action if you're involved in a situation like that. Never lose your head. Do not react emotionally. You must react rationally. You've got to be thinking in terms of staying calm and doing whatever is necessary, including, as I said, and hey, I'm sorry, but violence may be your only choice to save your life. And I don't care how much you hate violence. Weigh the two, either being killed by someone or killing someone so they can't kill you. Make a decision right now that you are capable and able to do that. And I always ask the question, raise your hand if you believe you could never take another human life. And every 3 or 4 presentations that we do, and by the way, I've got over 200 instructors throughout the world, from Canada, Mexico, Australia, that teach this course, the A.L.I.V.E course. And I always tell them, ask people if they think they could take another human life. And if they say no, prove to them that they can. Empower them. Show them that they have what it takes. Because the alternative is dying and never seeing the people you love and care about again. And that's not okay. That's not acceptable. So my advice is never lose hope. Learn how to protect yourself. It's shocking. It's saddening how many people in this country alone, let alone others, don't know how to protect themselves. They don't know any form of self-defense. And not knowing is part of the problem. Lacking the confidence of knowing that you can take care of yourself is that much closer of a step to being paralyzed, when you need to be confident and you need to be empowered and you need to take action. So I would say, don't live in a bubble. Understand that you can be a victim if you don't know how not to be. Never lose hope, and always learn how to be empowered. And that's not just about threats and violence. That is any challenge in your life. Maybe it's taking tests in college. Maybe it's talking to a girl that you like. Maybe it's fighting for that promotion at work. Bottom line is this: never allow yourself to believe that you can't succeed, overcome, and beat whatever challenge it is. And especially when that comes to your safety and your welfare and that of those that you care about.
Yeah, great point. And I appreciate your obviously concern for the human race. So everything that you said is just reeks to me as great information that I think our audience is going to enjoy. So thank you so much for interacting with us today and answering these questions. I think you will have a lot of interest in this. Obviously, the growth with your instructor program is going to get this out and about, and people will see your program. So thanks for doing what you're doing. And that's all we have for today. We're going to close out. I appreciate your time.
With you.
This brings us to an end of our conversation with Michael Julian. Michael, thank you for sharing your invaluable expertise and insights into active shooter survival. It's clear that your work that you're doing with A.L.I.V.E program is making a significant impact on personal and organizational safety. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, knowledge is your best defense, and be prepared to save lives. For more information about the A.L.I.V.E program or becoming a certified instructor, please visit www.RRRinvestigations.com/A.L.I.V.E. Stay safe, stay alert, and keep listening to us for this special webinar for more crucial discussions like this. Until next time, this is Roger Ryan signing off. Thank you everyone for joining us today for this incredible webinar on public safety and survival in active shooter situations. I want to express my gratitude to exceptional experts Derek LeBlanc, Police Chief Kevin Denney, and Michael Julian for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Your insights have been truly invaluable. Now, I'd like to remind you that the learning doesn't stop here. If you're interested in further enhancing your active shooter survival skills and preparedness, we offer comprehensive classes at RRR Investigations. You can sign up for our A.L.I.V.E Active Shooter Survival Program by visiting www.rrinvestigations.com/A.L.I.V.E. These classes are designed to provide you with practical hands-on training to better protect yourself and those around you. For those who are ready to take the next step and schedule class, please feel free to give us a call at 682-325-1442. Our team will be more than happy to assist you in finding a suitable class that fits your needs and schedule. Keep an eye on your inbox in the next few days for a follow-up email from us. We value your feedback, and your input is essential in helping continue to improve and provide you with the best resources for safety and preparedness. Thank you for being a part of this important event. Together, we're taking steps to be better prepared for the unexpected. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember that knowledge and preparedness are key to protecting yourself and your loved ones.